Hey, g'day guys, it's Calvin from the Cartoon Company in New Zealand. I do a heap of 1UZ, 3UZ conversions, wiring and related work. And when I'm doing a bit of this work, I often make a bit of a video, as many of you know, on the work I'm doing at the time. I'm presently doing some prep work for a 1UZ Vvti race car. It's going to get wired up with a link ECU, so there'll be some wiring video on that. However, I thought I would discuss the intake manifold. It sounds like a pretty simple component, but there's actually quite a lot to the 1UZ and 3UZ intake manifold, the Vvti, that a lot of people don't understand, or haven't taken the time, or haven't had one just to have a look and a think about what's going on in there. So we're going to have a discussion on that. There's a few ideas in my head, so let's see how this turns out. So over here I have my test engine. This happens to be a 3UZ. If you can notice, it's got a 1UZ VVti throttle body on it. Small coil packs like the late 1UZ VVti, so they can be a little hard to tell. This one's got the idler unit on it, and it's had a 1UZ VVti power steer pump on it, so that's slightly different. But it has the 3UZ oil filter housing. These headers, as mentioned in a few videos, they are not the factory unit. 3UZs have a really small unit on it. They're a set of my own extractors. But of course, we're working on intake manifold. I have one on the bench. So intake manifold here. Round cast fuel rails. Early 1UZ Vvti have this pink injector. 3UZ have the same injector until 2003, and then they changed. This port on the top, that is for the idle up for the power steering. So there's a port that comes off the plastic intake tube coming in, goes down to the valve on the power steer and back up to there. One thing I see a lot of people get wrong, and it's something real simple, we'll just turn this around, it's going to make noise. Is this here. This is the port for the brake booster. Now some of them will come blanked. We'll have a look over here. This is the correct unit here. A lot of the 1UZ VVTIs, that is blanked off on it. Here's an example of the blanker. This is on a non-VVTI, but they have this bolted like this. So with the little fittings for the brake booster, you can just buy them or raid one off another similar Toyota. So we have the Union. We'll give a part number for you. There's the Union. So that's that piece. You have the banjo bolt. We'll find a part number. I'll pop the part number up on the screen because you can't see the 9 in here. There's a 9 under there. So there's the part number for the bolt. And even the washers if you really want them. So we've covered the brake booster fitting. The idle up for the power steer. This solenoid, which is solenoid number 1, is for the fuel tank breather. So that goes off to your charcoal canister, controlled by the ECU. This unit here is a noise suppressor for the ignition system. Just bolted on there. Well, guys should know about that for in their wiring. Coming in, we have a single fuel line, dampener, and a dampener there. Line runs through the back, which is a bit of a pain actually to work on. The fuel system on the Vvti is returnless. In the factory setup, they have the fuel pressure regulator in the tank. I use a fuel filter with a built-in fuel pressure regulator running at 4 bar 58 psi, and that gives me the best results. Between the 1UZ Vvti and the 3UZ, there is a difference in throttle body. So the 1UZ Vvti throttle body, which I've covered in another video, is a drive-by-wire with the accelerator position sensor on the throttle body. And we'll be looking at that one closer in a moment. And the 3UZ has a throttle body that looks like this one here. So that's the early 3UZ throttle body up till about 2003. And then they swap to a different unit with a bigger assembly on here with the throttle position sensor and the motor all in one unit. This is a little interesting, this little cover here. Just going to see in here. Yeah. You can't see it, but there's a set of holes in here going up to this little cover. And there's a similar thing on this one. We will discuss that soon when we come to the injectors, but just take a note of that. We'll have a chat. Before getting into injectors, I want to discuss the AVIS. We're on the wrong end. So I did do a video on the Vvti's lacking power down low, and there's this flap system here, this actuator. It's a vacuum diaphragm, and up to a rod up to a lever. And we can hear things happening inside. As you've seen earlier, I've already got one apart. So with the AVIS system, that's Advanced Variable Intake System, it's designed to give better bottom end power. As I said, I did have one apart. So we have, that's the bottom half. Injectors, which look quite different. We'll go into that again soon. And here's our flap through the center. These holes go to the port. This hole feeds through. I need something to poke through it. So let me find something to poke through there and I'll show you. So here we go. So this hole feeds through to there. So in the low speed, with the flaps closed, it allows the air to flow right through and give a long intake tract for better bottom end torque. Default setting is open. So without vacuum, those flaps will sit like that. What it's designed to do is when it gets up in the revs, it shortens the intake tract to that long there. Much shorter for better high end power. We can take those flaps out. A side note, it's very common to find a bit of oil build up in here because the air speed slows down, especially at cruise speeds. So there's the set of flaps. They're very much like the old day 4 AGEs, similar in the way they're made. And we can see here again, there's that tract. So that's the high speed tract. That's the low speed tract there. So how's it controlled? So there's the solenoid. There's a wiring loom that comes out, and I've seen a lot of these wiring looms fall to pieces. So I always replace that at the same time. comes out here. It is here. It's normally bolted on a bracket up here on the right hand side of the intake manifold. Vacuum canister to hold some extra vacuum, and the solenoid. They fail a lot, so I recommend replacing them as part of your engine prep. So that's the AVIS system. Very, very simple once you know how it works. Next, I'm going to have a chat about the air-assisted injectors. To a lot of people, this is kind of a mystery. I happen to be on this one. I'm actually fitting a set of ID injectors. I've chosen IDs, even though there's some setup difficulties with ID injectors. I chose them because of the quality and the fuel atomization at very, very low pulse widths. I'm doing a bit of grinding on the cylinder head and on the intake manifold to make them all fit. And it made me think about the air-assisted injectors and that a lot of people don't know how they work. It's actually really, really simple and can cause problems if guys just go wanting to swap injectors in them. So let's have a bit of a look at that. So we go back to the throttle body, and I'm using the 1UZ Vvti here. The 3UZ has the same thing, and it relates to this hole and this hole here. So what we have in this area here is 9 small holes, bam, coming through, and they're just sitting on the outside of the throttle butterfly. It allows air up into here, and then there are drillings each corner which come out to these 2 holes. While I think about it, the stud length on the 3UZ and the 1UZ throttle body mounting bolts or studs are different lengths. So we have hole here and here on the gasket, sealing it off from the main intake manifold. And those holes go into the intake manifold. We can see here there is a port, and you will see there's thread in that, but that's because I've been in there. Normally that is just a drilling, and the other one comes over here. So there, you can actually look down here. Can we see it? No, it's actually in the manifold. There's a little piece of casting just to allow that port to flow through. So there's a supply of air there. It then relates to this hole and this hole on the bottom half of the manifold. Drilling is going that angle there, and on an angle that way. If we pop over here, we can see here's part of the casting, and there's a piece here. So there's a drilling. Here's the blanking bolt for it on the end. So there's a drilling along here where the injectors sit. There's also a drilling right there. Here it is here, running along the intake manifold. Right along. And another one on the side. Going in. Bam, bam, bam. So it's relating to the injectors holes again. So here it is with injectors installed. So we've got a supply of air coming down to each of those injectors. For those of you that have taken a moment to work out what I've been saying there and understanding it, holes on the outside of the throttle butterfly and into the engine will increase idle speed, or are part of the idle circuit. So these engines are drive-by-wire throttle, which does the idle. However, there is a port to bypass the throttle body into the engine down past the injectors. Let's find some injectors and have a little bit of a look. Here we have a very early 1UZ injector, purple, 215. There we have a dark blue, 250. You see the design? Dimensionally, it kind of suits. Here we have VVti. This plastic piece is just a cover. I can remove that cover and that foam. It looks exactly like this underneath. We see here on the seals, there's a seal that's that seal there, which seals into the larger dimension on the manifold, and a smaller seal right here. On the side of the injector we have some holes. I'll seal those ones up as much as I can. And I'm not sure we can see that, but I'm not sure you could see that. However, the 4 holes around the outside of the injector come down through where the fuel is getting injected into that engine. So for those of you that have been paying attention, as you can see, we have a passage of air that bypasses the throttle body at all times. It runs through the manifold and past those air-assisted injectors. So the idea is at very low engine speeds, and particularly at idle, there's a passage of air down past the injectors. It gets mixed with the fuel that's being injected, and hopefully improves the atomization of those of that fuel air mixture. That passage is always open. However, I suspect once that throttle butterfly opens more, the amount of air actually flowing through those ports will reduce just with the airstream going past it. Just the way that sort of design happens. If you're going to swap to a more normal injector, the ports need to be closed up, otherwise you're going to get an air leak, such as when you boost it. I've done a few supercharged vehicles, VVTIs in the past, and with the aftermarket lower manifold or the supercharger manifold, they don't have the air-assisted injectors, and we can put a normal type injector in it. Running the ID injectors, I've had to grind off a little lump of aluminium on the cylinder head at the front of one head and the rear of the other head, and then they fit just fine. So that's the air-assisted injectors sort of summarized. One more question I thought I would answer in this video is, guys often ask whether you can put the VVTi manifold onto the early non-VVTi engine. I'll do a whole video on that at another date, but we'll have just a really quick look. Here's the 2 gaskets. I'll line up the center hole here. We've got a different port shape, different lining up holes. They don't. And I have a pair of manifolds here. Probably the easiest way to look at it is if we go to the back here, one sits flat on the bench and the other one has an angle. So that's not really going to work. So I hope that was helpful. If you want to see me ripping a manifold off one of these VVTIs, watch after the credits. Otherwise, we'll catch you later. I'm going to pop this intake manifold off. Because this is my test engine. It has different throttle bodies fitted. It swaps between a 3UZ and a 1UZ throttle body. There's the gasket with the holes for the air-assisted injectors. There's actually another hole. That one we didn't discuss. And that's actually a difference between this one and this one. See, the 1UZ doesn't have the extra hole there. But the 3UZ does. And it is blowing directly into that intake manifold. It's not in the throttle body. So the 3UZ throttle body has an additional hole with this additional port air fitting on the top of it. I've got a couple of conversions coming up on 3UZs, so we'll be able to just look at a few more things on the 3UZs as I work my way through those conversions. One's going to be an automatic and one's going to be a manual. So in this case I'm not taking the top of the manifold off at all. I'm taking it all off in the one piece. Wiring loom was removed. I'd not long finished wiring another job on this engine. So that's the bolts off. I intend to swap the bottom half of the manifold in this particular job while I'm wiring it. And now the whole manifold comes off in one piece, and be careful not to break the vacuum canister underneath. One whole Vvti manifold in one piece. Someone's been filling it up with aluminium. The gaskets on the Vvti do have a correct way to go up as well. They've got the tags which go at the top with the white marks up. So they're pretty simple to get off. I'm going to give it a clean up. And as you can see, it's not too much of a job to get the intake manifold off when it's on the engine stand. So I do recommend you do your prep work properly on your engines, so you don't have to do it once you've fitted it. Hey, catch you later.